So good morning. It is a little after 10 o'clock, and we are here. This is the first meeting of the year for the Assembly Judiciary Committee, and we're here to have a conversation, a hearing on government contracting in California and the impacts that have come to us under Prop 209, which was passed a number of years ago. This is a good opportunity for us to sort of stretch our legs as a new committee. We have some new staff and certainly some new members, and hopefully members will be coming and going today as they do for informational hearings, but it's an important topic to get on the table and have a good discussion about. So with that, let's get started with our first panel, and we're asking that each witness have about 7 minutes or so to present and then also be available to answer questions. So if we come up and as a panel, Orrin Selstrom, Legal Director of the Lawyers Committee, San Francisco Bay Area, and Tanya Little, Business Development Program Manager from Department of General Services, if you could come up. We'll ask you to do your presentation and then be, as a panel, available for questions as we roll through that. So we'll start with Mr. Selstrom.
Thank you, Chair Stone and honorable members of the committee. My name is Orrin Selstrom, and I'm the Legal Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in the San Francisco Bay Area. For the last 18 years, I've provided legal counsel to coalitions of minority and women-owned businesses pursuing equal opportunity in public contracting.
The mic?
Is the mic on?
The red button is on.
Try it now. There's a red button in front of you. I think that's off, though. Oh. Yeah, push the red button again and try again.
Hello?
There you go. That was my fault.
Okay. As I said, for the last 18 years, I've provided legal counsel to coalitions of minority and women-owned businesses seeking equal opportunity in public contracting in California. In that struggle, there's no greater factor that impacts equal opportunity than Proposition 209. And yet, many Californians today have no idea what Proposition 209 is, much less the disastrous effect that it has had on minority and women-owned businesses and the impact that it has had on the state's economy as a whole. So we are very pleased that this committee has chosen to call for this informational hearing to shed some much-needed light on this topic. I've been asked to give an overview of the legal landscape relevant to Proposition 209, which is a critical place to begin because any needed reforms always have to take into account the legalities. Let me start with some of the basics about Proposition 209. It was passed as an initiative in November of 1996 by a relatively narrow margin. It went into effect in 1997. Its operative language is that it bans, quote, preferential treatment and discrimination based on race, ethnicity, and gender. It applies to the state as well as to local government entities, and it is operative in three contexts: public contracting, public education, and public employment. There is an important exception that is built into the law, which is that if a program is required by federal law or by a federal program, it is exempt from Proposition 209. So the leading example of that in California is that Caltrans operates a federal disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE program, for federally funded transportation contracts. That is allowed under Proposition 209 because it is required as a condition of federal funding. But for all other state-funded entities and local contracts, Proposition 209 will generally apply to public contracting. There have been two California Supreme Court cases that have interpreted the initiative, which serve as the cornerstone of any legal analysis. The first is the high-voltage wireworks case, which was in 2000. This was a challenge to San Jose's subcontracting program. It was a program that was typical of affirmative action contracting programs at the time. It required prime contractors to either have a minimum level of participation in subcontracting by minority and women-owned businesses, or if they failed to meet that minimum level, to at least show that they had done outreach to those communities to afford them the opportunity to bid on subcontracts. When the case got up before the California Supreme Court, the court struck that down as a violation of Proposition 209. Essentially, under the court's reasoning, because the city was requiring something to be given to minority and women-owned businesses, namely that outreach that was not required to be given to other populations, that constituted preferential treatment under Proposition 209. Now, notably, San Jose did not have or introduce anything into the record in that case that showed the need for the program, the type of statistics that you will hear this morning from others that can be compiled. There was not any of that evidence in the record in that case. The second case up before the California Supreme Court that's important to know about is the Carl Construction case. This was in 2010. I don't want to go into the details of all of that in the interest of time, but the main takeaway from that case is the California Supreme Court said that there will be some instances where the level of evidence of underutilization of minority and women-owned businesses, the evidence of discrimination is so large that federal law will essentially trump Proposition 209 and allow some kind of race or gender conscious program. Under federal equal protection, there can be a constitutional duty on the part of the state or local governments to institute a remedial plan to open up opportunities. And the California Supreme Court said that in an appropriate instance, that can override Proposition 209's ban on preferential treatment. The court did not sketch out exactly what evidence would be needed for that, but made clear that the hurdle would be relatively high. So those two cases and some other intermediate cases that have come out have left us with a couple of options for dealing with Proposition 209. And there are a couple of elements that are clearly permissible under 209. One is simple data collection. The idea that that policymakers, the public, need to know the levels of participation of minority and women-owned businesses in order to gauge the extent of the program and to be able to figure out remedial options. The courts have made clear that that is not impacted by Proposition 209 because it's not preferential treatment. Even conservative courts have said that is an absolute minimum that policymakers must have that kind of data in order to be able to act. Second, inclusive outreach programs and other subcontracting programs are permissible. So if you have a program, for example, where prime contractors are required to reach out to minority-owned businesses, to women-owned businesses, and to other businesses, that type of all-inclusive outreach is permissible. You'll recall that the problem that the California Supreme Court found with San Jose's program was that it was targeted only to MBEs and WBEs. If you include other businesses in that outreach, that is unproblematic under Proposition 209. Finally, there's a whole range of small and micro business programs that are not implicated by Proposition 209. If a program is based on business size rather than MBE or WBE status, then Proposition 209 is not implicated, even if there are many MBEs and WBEs that are, in fact, small businesses or micro businesses. So the upside of those small or micro business programs is that you can actually be much more aggressive in those programs than you used to be able to be under MBE, WBE programs. As an example, even before Proposition 209, it was very rare that you would have set-asides, contracts that could only be bid on by minority and women-owned businesses. That was a very high legal standard to meet. By contrast, if you have a small and micro business program that is based on business size, you can have the kind of tool like set-asides where only smaller micros can bid on certain contracts. You can have mandatory minimums and much more aggressive measures. So that is the upside of a small and micro business program. The downside is that, frankly, they're much less effective. If the nature of the problem that you're trying to get at is underrepresentation of minority and women-owned businesses, then a small and micro business program may be effective in some measure, but much less effective than a targeted program is. So that is essentially the legal landscape as we have it today. Because of the inefficacy of some of the small and micro business programs that we've got, many of us believe that the ultimate long-term goal must be repeal of Proposition 209. But until that time, there do remain legal tools and legal avenues to at least ameliorate some of the most disastrous effects of Proposition 209 on minority and women-owned businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Little, I understand you're waiting on some information.
Yes, I could probably start.
Because if you need to, we can move to the next panel and come back to you.
That would work. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to jumble up a little bit. So I'm sorry, Mr. Selstrom, if you can stick around, because we'll ask questions on, or be able to come back up if there are questions for this panel. We're going to pause the panel and move to the next one while Ms. Little gets information. So the next one is, what has been the impact of Prop 209 on California's minorities, women, and small business owners?
Did you want to ask that question? Do you want to wait and have the questions?
Yeah, I want to do questions by panels. So, yeah. Thank you. So this next panel. Oh,
it's here? It's arrived.
all right. It's arrived. So I apologize. We are back to our original plans then. So we will now hear from Ms. Little, the Business Development Program Manager, Department of General Services. Yeah, so Mr. Selstrom, come on back up. And when Ms. Little is done, then we will have questions from the committee. All right. Ms. Little.
Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Good morning, Committee Chair Stone and members. Thank you for inviting me to provide remarks today. I'm Tanya Little, California's Business Development Program Manager from the Department of General Services. The Business Development Program's mission is to enhance state commerce with California's emerging and underrepresented businesses, small businesses, and disabled veteran-owned businesses. To accomplish the program goals, I'm identifying the opportunities and the successes of small businesses, large businesses, and state departments. Prior to my appointment by Governor Brown on July 25, 2014, I served in several positions at DGS, beginning in 2008 with the Office of Small Business and Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise Services. I led a dynamic group of people who really care about small businesses' successes in state contracting. This is where my passion and advocacy for California's business community was born. Today I'll be talking about two main topics: the state's existing outreach to women and minority-owned businesses, and the state's data collection efforts related to them. In 2002, after the passage of Prop 209, the legislature enacted Government Code Section 11139.7, which permits the states and local governments to include outreach efforts to minority and women-owned businesses. DGS has built strong partnerships with ethnic chambers of commerce, women's organizations, and by the way, last fiscal year, the Communication and Outreach Unit participated in 150 events, reaching approximately 20,000 businesses attendees from all demographic groups through workshops, conferences, webinars, and meetings. Last year, in partnership with the Department of General Services Office of Public Affairs, I began using social media to communicate with sponsored employee training opportunities for businesses. So my idea is that sometimes they can't get out in the field and help each other with employment opportunities, so I thought if I could provide that information that will be accessible to them. I also began using LinkedIn as another way to connect with the business community. This June, in partnership with CalVet, GoBiz, and 3 DGS divisions, we're convening a state collaboration focus group to identify gaps and opportunities for construction contracts. The goal is to increase the state's small business participation in contracts while preserving the involvement of disabled veteran-owned businesses. In my effort to reach all California businesses, last December, DGS staff and I launched a new business development webpage containing state and federal resources, links, and surveys. The survey tools capture business success stories, demographic information, and feedback about the program. Now I will talk about the data collection. Public Contract Code 10111.F requires state departments to request business owners to voluntarily report their race, ethnicity, and gender upon the award of a contract. Business owners are asked to disclose the ethnic and minority classifications as defined in Public Contract Code Section 2051C. The classifications are Asian Indian, Black, Hispanic, Native American, Pacific Asian, or other. Business owners are asked to disclose their race classification as defined by the Federal Office of Management and Budget. The classifications are American Indian and Alaska Native, Black or African American, Asian, Native, Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, white, and then the category of other. Public Contract Code 10115 was enacted in 2005 and amended to include lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender reporting in January of 2013. Awarding departments are prohibited from using data to discriminate or provide a preference in the solicitation or acceptance of bids, quotes, or estimates for goods and services, construction, or information and technology. The information is not collected until after the contract is made, and since it is voluntary to submit this information, the response rate is low, and the data may not be representative of the total population. My fieldwork has given me insight about the challenges businesses face in identifying ways to meet and establish professional relationships with state departments in order to learn about future contract opportunities. In this new appointment, I will be able to address some of these challenges. I thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. So questions from committee members for the panel? Mr. Jud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to make just a couple of prefacing comments and welcome our panelists, many of whom are from my city of San Francisco and from Northern California. And for our colleagues, if you don't know many of these panelists, they are truly the foremost experts in the impact of changes within our contracting laws in recent years. I have a feeling at some point in this hearing we're going to talk about this report that has been put out about the impact of Prop 209 on California's minority and women-owned businesses. But I have to admit, I think this $1 billion figure that has been laid out of the impact and the loss of dollars is unbelievably troubling. And we all have seen over the last couple of decades the terrible impact this has had on African American, Latino, Asian American communities, as well as the impact on continuing to exacerbate gender inequality in our local economies. There have been a lot of attempts locally to try to mitigate some of the impact, but I'm just going to state this. From my perspective, I think Proposition 209 has been incredibly harmful, has had an incredibly negative impact, and I am certainly one who thinks that it needs to be repealed in its entirety. That being said, as Mr. Selstrom alluded to, we are where we are today, and we have to figure out how we proceed, given the fact that it is on the books. And I wanted to ask both panelists, I've heard from you the importance of data collection and the importance of more inclusive outreach programs. What more can the state do in those areas? So, for example, we hear about the importance of voluntary data collection. Seems to me we're not getting all the data we need. We're not able to analyze exactly what all the impacts are. Could you talk a little bit more, if it were up to you, what could the state do better to really track where the issues are?
Okay, well, I'll take that question. As a part of work being done with the Financial Information System of California, that's FISCAL, they're the business transformation project in the areas of budget, accounting, procurement, and cash management. And we're in the process of actually discussing collecting the data as voluntary reported by businesses at the time of when they register with the FISCAL system or either at the time they submit bids. But we're in the process of still defining and having that conversation because there may be a number of legal or technical issues that we need to make before that decision can be made. However, that's one of the areas I'm pursuing in one of my plans.
I would just echo that. As Ms. Little said, I think there are various ways that you can go about data collection, even if it's voluntary. You can just say, hey, if you want, report whether you're an MBE or WB or what your status is, or you can say you're required to fill out a form that says and return a form that indicates your status if you want to put decline to state, and in that way it would still be voluntary. But that would, I think, get you much more information than under our current system where, as Ms. Little said, the return rate is, as we understand it, very low. So nobody really knows at this point the level of minority and women-owned business participation in state contracting. What Equal Justice Society and Mr. Lorenz have done in the report that Assemblymember Chu referred to is really to compile that after the fact, some of that information. But really, that has got to be government's role to do that on an ongoing basis, to report out publicly, and therefore to keep the most critical data on an ongoing basis, in our view, is what is necessary.
And just one final comment I'd say for Ms. Little. We had a similar local conversation in San Francisco around these very topics of data collection, and it was very frustrating for many of the policymakers of how long it would take this data to be collected. And I know 19 years after Prop 209, we're obviously having an important conversation, but I would like to just ask you a little bit of a sense of what's the time frame for when you're going to be able to do your work. And I would personally just love to be kept abreast of the progress on that. If there is help that policymakers can provide to push that along within the administration, happy to be a voice to champion that. So I want to get a sense from you. It sounds like you are in flux in doing this. What's the time frame? How can we make sure it gets done faster?
No, thank you so much. Well, as I said, I was appointed in July, and so when I came up with this idea, we were already in the throes of implementing the financial information system, which the first phase, or the second phase we're in, will go effective July. So we're in the process of outreaching to the business community and sharing with them how to log in and the whole process, as well as the stakeholders and state departments. So it's kind of hard to say when this would actually occur. I've been talking about working on it probably starting next year, with possibly an implementation in 2017.
I know there's a civil rights phrase about how it's important that we can't wait, but why don't I suggest my office, we're happy to be in touch with you, and if there are things that we can do to speed that along, I'm happy to be an advocate for that, I know. And I appreciate the fact that you've just gotten into your job. You've got a lot of responsibilities on your plate, but look forward to doing that work.
All right, thank you.
So, Ms. Little, with respect to the DGS and looking at the outreach and then the data collection, what changed within DGS after 209?
Well, the major change would have been the reporting piece for the minority and business and women-owned communities. I worked with the Office of Small Business for several years. That's where I started. And when I came aboard, that information was practically not, it's not there. We have history of information, but nothing more than that.
Okay, and given the time frame that's gone since 209 was passed and today, what other efforts has DGS undertaken in the meantime to try and reach these populations?
Yeah, we have various relationships with a lot of the ethnic chambers, as I mentioned, and we're constantly working with them, providing training on how to do contracting, to help small businesses and minority-owned businesses be successful. So with the various outreach events we have throughout the state and partnering with the various advocates at the departments, we're working to ensure that everyone has a fair opportunity.
Okay. And one of the challenges for WBEs and DBEs really is access, and this is a lot of an access issue that we're talking about. A lot of the larger contractors who are looking to get contracts with the state know how to do that and know how to lobby. Are there changes that we could and should be looking at with respect to disclosures about those lobbying efforts and about interactions with state government that would help shine the light on the access issues that we have?
Well, I can tell you what my plans and goals are specific to access, and I'm working with the State Department Small Business and DVB advocate community to actually maybe showcase an area once a year where businesses can actually come to DGS and meet various representatives from state departments. Another area I have dealing with for access on an ongoing basis is to set up teleconferences and video conference meetings for businesses that cannot commute to Sacramento to meet with the such advocates. to provide them that kind of access. So those are things I've looked at to address those particulars.
Okay, because we do have tools like Form 700 and others that help facilitate the disclosures. And when you're dealing with contractors, do you ask contractors to do the same thing with their subcontractors to be able to report about race, gender?
Well, we're following Public Contract Code 10111F, and it
Right.
doesn't require us to go further than the actual awardee of the contract, because that's who the relationship is with.
Right, so you haven't built that in then to ask for that, to collect that information up from the subcontractors?
No, we have not.
Okay. And then Governor Wilson issued some executive orders. What impact have they had on how you address this issue within DGS?
I believe the executive order we're talking about is SO206 from Wilson. Is that for small business?
I believe so. I'm not sure the number.
Okay, if that's the only one I think I'm aware of. And basically that one encourages departments to outreach to all businesses to enhance the state's ability to achieve the small business 25% participation goal. That's the only one I can think of.
Okay, and what effect has that had on how DGS operates or being able to address the inclusion of DBEs and WBEs?
Well, what we do is we have an option called the Small Business and Disabled Veteran Business Option. It's a contracting method from $5,000 to $25,000, which is a competitive process, but it's a streamlined process for departments to use to reach out to the small businesses and DVBEs to ask for two-bid quotes. So that is one method to help the micro businesses and smaller communities to participate with the state directly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Other questions from committee members?
I guess I would look at this not any different from my colleagues and believe that we need to roll this back into 209 and sort of get back to a place where we're looking at fairness and equity, but recognizing the diversity of the state. But in this environment that we're in, and you're here before this committee, what would be your request that this legislative body might be able to do to help you do your job more effectively in terms of outreach or data collection, so that you, if where you are in terms of being in a position to implement and even create policies could be made easier or more efficient, what is it that you would ask of this body to do to help you do your job in getting the word out and outreaching and data collecting throughout the state for small minority-owned businesses? And you may not have the answer right at this particular moment, but I mean, I think it's important to share information, but also whatever roadblocks you're coming up against or creativity that you might see as being within the lines, legal lines of 209, but something that might require legislative support, I think it would be helpful for you to share that with us.
I think there are things about state law that could be that could have more teeth in them, frankly. That if we're talking about a race and gender neutral framework, as I said, you can be more aggressive. So there's, for example, a 25% aspirational goal that I think Governor Schwarzenegger first implemented by executive order. That could be a mandate. You don't have to say, let's try and reach that goal. You can say, that should be the goal that we are mandated to meet. You can have more in the way of set-asides. You can have more in the way of contracting minimums. Again, it would be for small and micro businesses, but that will help minority and women-owned businesses because many fall into that category. So a lot of those small and micro elements can really be strengthened, and that would at least help ameliorate some of those impacts. As people have said, the issue is often about access, and minority and women-owned businesses, in order to break in really need the support of project managers at the state level, the prime contractors who know they're not going to get a contract unless they meet a certain minimum. They know how to make that happen. We don't always know from the outside looking in, but the more you set mandates and requirements, that will get to the goal that you want, even if it's not fully to the repeal of Proposition 209. Those kind of elements with more teeth in them are going to help minority and women-owned businesses.
Thank you. So create the hammer.